All right, we are live and we are waiting for Mark to join us here on the live stream today. And speaking of which, here he is. All right, let's get him in here. Admit. Oh,
Mike, my man.
hey, how you doing? Hold on one second. I'm just going to change my headphones. There we go.
Boom.
I'm looking forward to this.
So am I. One Canadian to the next.
Exactly. We should have people in the chat hopefully very soon. Awesome. You know, we've got some members of the TimeCrafting Trust community. These are premium members that are going to be joining us today. So I'm excited to see them join us. I'm going to just say, just give me 1 second here. Got questions?
Yeah, fire away.
Ask away. Especially, it's pretty fitting considering who I'm talking to because asking questions. All right, I'm gonna hit the record. I'm gonna make sure the record is going now.
Okay.
Resume recording. I'm gonna hit recording on the Rodecaster Pro here. All right, so the stream is live, and let's just do this one more time. I hit butt questions, not ask a question. All right. Well, so here's how this kind of goes. I don't need to have this open anymore because I can see in the chat what's going on. The live chat will replay. The stream is working. I can put my iPad away.
Boom.
We've got another one coming up. We've got another one coming up later today. So you're not the only conversation I'm having today. The next one I'm having is with Laura Vanderkam.
Oh, awesome.
A little later today. Your episode isn't scheduled to go live for a while. So
Okay.
What'll be great is members of TimeCrafting Trust Premium will be able to see this well in advance, starting maybe as early as today if they watch the recording. If they're watching live, they're obviously watching it now. If otherwise, I think it's not coming out till, I want to say like closer to February, to be honest, at this point. But let me just double check real quick here. While we kind of get into it. We only need about a half hour or so for our conversation itself. I'll be respectful of time. Yeah, this episode technically will be, this episode is February 8th at this point.
All right.
So,
well, it'll be a good reminder for everyone coming out of those New Year's resolutions and that naturally reflective period of the year to hopefully play this back and fire up those prompts and practices and make sure that year's thriving.
Exactly. All right, so let's get started. The way that we do this is that we actually have the guest introduce themselves.
Okay.
So the way this works is you will say, and I'll point to you when we're ready, is, hi, state your name.
Okay.
And I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy. And then that goes at the beginning of the episode. Then we throw in, I separately record. So if you're watching this live or the recording of it or whatever, I record the intro and outro completely separate. We have dynamic ads that get inserted at a certain point in the episode. Our producer, Keith, puts all that stuff together.
Okay.
And then, then we just get, so once you say that intro, we just get right into the conversation. And like
Perfect.
I said, we only need we have until the 10:45 mark here in the Pacific time zone. You're in the Eastern time zone, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep.
So for you, that'll be 1:45, I guess.
Sure.
And we'll be done easily by then. So if you're ready to get started, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Let's rock.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
I'm Marc Champagne. Oh, sorry, you want me to Let's redo that.
Great. So your line is, hi, state your name.
Okay.
And I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Oh,
That's
I
all
love
you gotta
it.
say.
Okay.
Okay, you ready? Here we go. Let's do it.
Is there a blooper reel?
Here we go. This is gonna. Yeah, we'll
This
probably.
is it?
Yeah, this is for the members. They're gonna love this. They're seeing it live, or the recording goes up raw. So whatever. They get to see how the sausage gets made. But anyway, here we go. Ready? 3, 2.
Hello, I'm Marc Champagne, and I'm having a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
We're gonna need take 3 because you're not having it yet. You're about to have it.
I'm about to have.
Or a boot to have it.
Okay.
Okay. So again, the line is
this is epic fail on my side.
It's okay. No judgment, just questions. Here we go. So it's hi or hello, whatever. State your name.
Yeah.
And I'm about to have a productive
Okay.
conversation with Mike Vardy. Okay?
All right, let's do it.
Take 3. 3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Marc Champagne, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
There we go. There we go.
We did it.
We did it. We did it. Okay, Keith, you know where to take. You don't have to say, there we go, there we go, there we go. Mark, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait. Just with that start, we're going to have a blast.
So for those of you listening to the actual podcast recording, it took 3 takes. Now, to be fair, you did not take the longest to get that right. So just know that. Just know that.
Okay.
But we did not hear our typical Ontario. You've spent enough time outside of Ontario, because people think that the Canadian accent would say about. It's like, oh, everyone says about. And that's not true.
No.
It can be pronounced, like it can get that way. But you're based where? You're just outside of Toronto, right?
Yeah, I'm in a couple hours outside of Toronto in Collingwood, Ontario. I did live in Toronto for a number of years and lived in Montreal as well, but we are in Collingwood. For anyone that is on the West Coast, I'd say we have the fake mountains over here, but at least I'm skiing and snowboarding on something, but it's definitely not the West Coast Rockies.
No, and this is, again, I'm on the West Coast of Canada in Victoria. Yeah, we have, even the mountains on the island are more impressive. I used to live in a place called Hamilton, which is not too far from Toronto, and they called it Hamilton Mountain. When you go back there, you're like, not really.
It's a bump. It's a little bit of a bump.
It's a cliff at best. Mark, I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you for a while. I have in my hands my friend Mike. I think was it Mike Schmitz that gave this to me. My friend Mike Schmitz from the podcast Bookworm.
Yeah.
And we're good friends. He gave me a copy of this as a gift, which I was going to get anyway, because we're going to talk about the building of this book too, because we've had Joey on the program before, Joey Cafone from Bear and Fig, and the building of this book itself, the craftsmanship that goes into it, it's fantastic. But the book is called Personal Socrates, Questions That Will Upgrade Your Life from Legends and World-Class Performers. And right out of the gate, I want to ask you, because I think a lot of people don't take time for questioning. They're so frenetic with the pace of the world, their day, what have you, that they don't, that thoughtfulness and mindfulness sometimes is removed from the equation. So why do we need to take time for questions and questioning? Like, why does it matter?
Well, I think you nailed it at the very end of your statement, where people, because we all ask questions, it's just, are we asking the right questions, and are we asking intentional questions? That's the difference. And you mentioned that at the very end. I think I want to give ourselves some credit, because we're living and operating in a society that is not really conducive to slowing down to ask questions. It's always the next thing. It's always the next meeting. And as soon as you flip on any type of content, we're getting hit hard with post after post. So it's just, we're operating in this very fast-paced world where, obviously, given the topic of the show, where doing the most in the least amount of time is still really celebrated. Which, just knowing the show, I'm assuming we probably agree on a different definition on how to work.
Yeah.
So, with that all being said, it's no surprise that the default operating state is like frantic, or we feel like we're in states of anxious thoughts and looping narratives and so forth, and like things are just moving so fast. So what it takes, though, I think, is that we need to find a relatable narrative. And whether that's a book like what I put out there, or Stoic philosophy, or whatever it is that lights you up, just to pause for even a minute to ask some good questions, then all of a sudden we can surface some clarity, slow down, because we have all the answers. It's just we don't let them surface, right? So I think that's why, we're all born asking a million questions, right? That's how we learn how to walk and move and get around in life. And then at one point, we start asking fewer and fewer questions until usually we hit some sort of wall. metaphorical wall. Something explodes in our lives and we're forced to ask questions. And a lot of us have been forced, just given everything going on with the pandemic. It's forced a lot of global reflection, I would say. But we don't have to wait for these like life-changing, altering events. We can slow down, build it into our routines on a daily basis. That doesn't take very long, and stack that into our current rituals and routines just to be a little bit more self-aware, and then it keeps snowballing from there in a good way.
I recently tweeted, as we're recording this, one of Socrates' quotes, because we're going to talk about the Socratic method, because some people may not be familiar with it, and I'll get you to address it in a minute. But there was a quote: "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." And that, man, like to be, you mentioned that we probably have a, simpatico in terms of how we think about working and being more intentional. And like I've said this before, it bears repeating. Productivity is not about efficiency and effectiveness. Those are byproducts. Productivity is about the alignment and the active linking of intention and attention. Simple as that, pure and simple. And if your attention is on something you didn't intend, then you're going to end up in a place you didn't want to go, and you're going to wonder how you got there. And if you're, if your intention doesn't get the attention it deserves, then you're going to, languish. You're going to, why didn't I get this thing done? Oh, right, because I didn't I didn't point it in that direction. Let's talk about why the Socratic method has played such a role, not just in the building of this book, but just in your life.
Well, I'm glad you had Joey in the show, because Joey actually has a lot to say, or a lot to do with how this, first of all, the book title and the link with the Socratic method. I've known Joey for quite some time, and we first met when I was running one of the first guided journaling apps in the app world, around the time when all the big meditation apps were taking off, like Calm and Headspace. And I had linked up with Joey and the team at Baron Fig around that time, just looking for print services and so forth. And when we were chatting about, fast forward essentially 5 years later, we're chatting about the book and the concept I had just started outlining and mapping the idea. And I was telling him about the podcast as well that I still host, Behind the Human, and how all of my work centers around collecting and curating these questions that anyone's asking, whether they're Olympians or, successful entrepreneurs or designers, writers, technologists, like it didn't matter who it was. They were all asking these really impactful questions, and they'd ask a big question, then a, question that would follow suit, and it would just continue to unpack to get to the core of things. And I remember Joey saying, he's like, "Oh, so you're talking about the Socratic method." I said, I never really thought about it that way. I'm like, I know of Socrates, like most people probably listening, and that's about as far as I went. Unlike, Joey, I didn't have a minor in philosophy. So so Joey and I had a good chat, and then he follows it up by saying, "This book should be named Personal Socrates." And I said, "Joey, absolutely not. I am not a philosopher. I don't want this book to feel like some sort of philosophy book in some capacity where I was just thinking, oh, it's going to be really dry and this and that. And I apologize for any philosophy majors out there. It's a huge part of my life, but I'm painting a different light on it right now. I continued down that track until I started to look into Socrates. And, to go past the surface myself. So I was asking the questions and following my curiosity, saying, like, who is this guy? What's the deal? And it didn't take very long, Mike, but it's pretty impressive that almost since the beginning of time, we're using a method that is still around, invented by, Socrates. We're not necessarily doing it intentionally, but we are doing it in some capacity. So how is it that a method has stood the test of time, and what can we do to modernize it so we can be a little bit more intentional with the questions and so that the narratives match present day? Right. And that's when I started to get really excited about it, and to just unpack, okay, well, let's look at the Socratic method, what scholars were saying about it, and back in those days too, what Plato and so forth, what they were saying about that method, and take it and boil it down to something so simple that we don't have to think about it. And that really links to what you just said around productivity as well. Is Step one, asking questions to get clear. We need to know where we're at, where we're heading, whether that's personally, who am I striving to become, or professionally, what's the outcome of this project, or what's the desired outcome. Plant the goalposts. And then after that, questions to make sure that we're taking intentional actions. Do my habits, do my systems, do they support the person I'm striving to become, or are they pushing me farther away from that person? And the third part just happens by default. There's an expansion of possibility when that happens, because now you can see the path because you've taken that time to get clear. You've designed and adjusted your workflow, your life, everything in your realm of control to support that path. And then all of a sudden, oh yeah, obviously, that's the path, or that's the conversation, or someone starts to call that. You're like, oh, that seems like the timing is quite interesting on that one. Well, it's because you're doing the things to support those outcomes.
Yeah, I have a question lined up, and I'm going to get to it in a minute. It has to do with journaling, because you talked about the journaling app, and I remember going through the introduction and things like that. I want to talk about journaling a little bit, but Edward, who's a member of TimeCrafting Trust Premium that's on the live stream, has a question. He goes, what are the most powerful questions that others have asked you? And who were they? Maybe that asked those questions.
So I'll think of a few of them, but I mean, the one that comes to mind that's most prominent, it's always ironic because this is the question I've asked probably about 300 people now, and it's how I start my show, and it's just, who are you? And the question, I can't really think of the, who asked me this. I've been asked a few times, but whenever I have that question flipped back at me, because I've thought about it, but it evolves, right? Like if you think about who you are today, it's probably a little bit of a different answer than who you were maybe 12 months ago. Mm-hmm. And there are obviously through line characteristics and qualities and so forth that follow us throughout our whole life, but we evolve. And I'm always taken back when I'm asked that question as if I've never thought about it. I'm like, oh, that's a good, that's a good question, because it serves as a good check-in. For me, it's a check-in on, I've spent the time identifying like who I'm striving to become and where I'm trying to head and so forth, and doing a lot of work to make sure that I'm heading down that direction. But this always serves as the check-in on, am I still that person, or am I evolving into, that the world that I'm trying to create, for example. So, that's the most practical question.
Well, let's drill down on it a little bit, because who asked you that question? Like, who asked you that question first that made you kind of like, because I know that, the most common question people ask is like, so what do you do? Right? Like it becomes not the who are you, but what do you do? Right? It's like the activity versus like the doing versus the being, right? Like, I guess. So the question is, I know that, if I was to walk up to someone in a party setting and say, like the typical, hey, what do you do? How's work? But if I was like, who are you? They'd either go, well, you don't know who I am, or they would say, like, they'd give me a bit of a side-eye glance, right? So who asked you that question first, and what was your initial reaction, like, oh, or was it like what? How did that feel for you?
Well, I can, let me give you a different question, because the question before that one is this one, and the question before that one was posed to me by Chip Conley. A well-known author, and someone doing really great work in the modern elder category, as he just defines it. And it was during a time when my life was on fire, essentially, in all the wrong ways. I was shutting down that journaling app that I mentioned in the beginning. Things were very uncertain, a lot of anxiety. First time in my life I didn't have a plan forward. And I remember emailing Chip. I'd interviewed him once at that point. And I just explained what happened. I said, do you have any advice? And Chip just replied back. He always replies with very short emails, and this was probably the most impactful one-liner that he ever gave me. And he just said, well, what do you want for your life? And that question, Mike, if I ask that question to myself right now, it serves as a really good check-in, and it links really well with that who are you and who you're striving to become. But in that moment, that was the question that literally paused the track to deep depression. And I don't, if he hadn't asked that question, I don't know where the path would have taken me. Hopefully it would have been somewhere near here, but definitely would have been more of a windy road, because that question paused my looping thoughts long enough to start to get clear to then ask other questions. Well, if this is what I want, then what do my days look like?
Right.
How do I set up my days? Who do I need to speak with? What would that look like? How would I feel if that's what I want for my life? And again, following that Socratic method before even knowing that it was really the Socratic method, it started to map a plan, because there was like I said, I think it was the first time in my life where I didn't have a plan forward, and that question allowed for a plan to start to be generated, motivation, hope to come back. And I think a year and a half later is when I started writing the book. And it's funny, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, Chip's on the cover of it, so it's with a blurb, which I couldn't think of a better full circle moment.
Yeah. The blurb, by the way, is Personal Socrates is where ancient wisdom meets modern day mental fitness. And it's interesting as you're talking about that. I'm like, obviously that question was a pattern break to a degree, because you didn't expect it. Secondly, it led to the who are you? And much like you said about the who are you question, the question Chip asked you, the answer will also change depending on where you're at in your life. So that question is, to me, I'm imagining to you as well, a question that is not like a one and done. It's not a one and done. Most aren't, right?
No, it's not one and done. And I think that's where we again, because if we let our minds go onto default mode, we're always going to be pointed into a fear state survival mode, just given the surroundings that we have. So we have to consciously set our lives up and make sure we have the habits and the systems and the environment around us to support who we are or who we're striving to become, right? And understanding, okay, well, if this is what it is, like, again, coming back to that question, if this is what I want for my life, well, if I don't check in with myself either at the end of the day, or what I would say probably one of the most effective check-in practices is kind of mid-afternoon on a Friday. 3 questions. What did I learn this week? What would I have changed this week? And what can I celebrate about this week? Those 3 questions take 10-15 minutes and can ever so slightly just course correct the journey. And without those, that's when you find yourself on a whole other mountain, and you get to the top and you're like, shit, I climbed the wrong mountain. Right? How did that happen? How did I get so far down this track? And that's where I really, I'm biased obviously, but that's where I really believe good quality questions can help really make sure that we don't end up in those positions. And even if we do, how we can course correct and swing over to the appropriate mountain.
Let's circle back to journaling now, because that is, to me, one of the most, and again, I've said this so many times, it's a hill or a mountain I'm willing to die on. Journaling is one of the most undervalued and underused productivity implementations that we have, right? Because it leads to, like you said, it leads to those questions. I'm curious, for those that struggle with it or dismiss it, which is a form of struggling with it, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
What would you do? Having built an app that, and obviously, I think if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, you closed the app down not because, hey, journaling is dead. It was just, there was a lot of other things going on. I mean, I use the Reflection app by Holstey, which they just actually, as of this recording, they just did a bit of a retrofit to it.
Nice.
They made some upgrades to it. They've got questions within it that lead to like monthly reviews and annual reviews and things like that. A lot of them don't have. And the Holstey folks are quite,
they're great.
The Holstey Manifesto. I mean, that's where most people would know them from. But journaling, what would you say to somebody who they've been on the fence with it, or they've tried it and dropped it? Like, how do you get someone to recognize, because it's the benefits of it, so that they can make sure they're climbing the right mountain, make sure they can course correct quickly and easily?
Yeah. Well, first, I think we need to blow open the definition of journaling, or at least let go of any past definition you may have had of it. Because just like what I'm talking about with society and so forth, there is a bit of a Hollywood version of journaling, which typically, and I used to get this all the time when I was running the app, revolved around this idea of, oh, you're speaking of the 12-year-old girl writing about the boy at school in her diary, which there's nothing wrong with that. But no, not necessarily. I'm talking about people that are taking time to reflect on some pretty powerful questions, or just taking time to think And when you think of journaling from that perspective, the definition then for me for journaling is just reflection. And now when you take that into account, that opens up a whole other slew of options to journal. It doesn't just have to be pen to paper. There's good science to support that, but it can be in an app. It can be leaving yourself an audio note or taking a walk in silence and just leaving with a question or to think. That's all journaling. So we all journal. Again, we just don't typically do it intentionally. That's the difference, right? So I would just suggest for people to try it out, just first, and it's easier to start with questions. There are different forms. I mean, you can free write and just kind of empty your mind and so forth. But I find, and coming back to Chip, he's one of the chapters in the book, and some of his questions have been really helpful for myself. But just taking some time in the morning to check in with yourself, right? How am I feeling today? One word. Do I feel anxious? Do I feel, tightness in my chest? Like, where do I feel that? Sometimes just asking that question lightens the whole emotional roller coaster. And you can do that while your coffee's brewing or your tea's steeping. And then don't stop there, though. Then set the intention of, well, how do I want to show up today? We typically don't decide that we want to show up miserable or that we want to show up low energy. We say, I want to show up, energized, happy, grateful, whatever it is, but you set that intention. And even if you just start there, which so far everything I described is probably going to take you under 2 minutes, you'll start to notice the benefits. And then you start layering in those other practices, like I said, on end of the week, where you're just 3 questions, just checking in. All right, how am I doing? What's going on here? Gratitude. Anytime, just anyone listening, the next time your mind loops, because it will. We all have looping thoughts. Something throws us off. You get an email that irks you or rubs you the wrong way, or you start reading into it like, oh, did I not send the right information, or whatever it is. Notice that that's happening, which a journaling practice or any of these mental fitness practices will help you become more self-aware. Once you notice it's happening, then just pause and loop into a gratitude practice. Think of someone in your life that you would like to give credit or thanks to that you haven't given credit or thanks to in a long time. Just send them a message. Hey, I was just thinking about you. I hope you have a great day. That's it. They're probably going to get that message. You've made their day. They'll write back and say something, wow, you made my day. Thank you for sending that. Now they've made your day. And what's not happening while that whole cycle is happening is you're not looping. So fast, seconds. But when we don't do that, we flip into this loop that can literally hijack our entire day and throw everything else off, and sometimes days, weeks, and years. That's how all this stuff starts to stack. And as Chip Conley says, it's the psychic toll that we collect day after day when we don't do these check-ins and just release and just blow out, the mental clutter that's accumulating.
Yeah, again, it gets back to that quote, beware the barrenness of a busy life. Like if the barrenness part is the zest, the joy, the human part.
Yeah.
And busy can mean, if you look up that word busy, there's a lot of definitions. And I think all of them have nicely combined into occupied, foolish, foolish thoughts around busyness. Like there's lots of that there. Barrenness literally means like emptiness. And when you do something like that, I actually have in my to-do list a YouTube video about this too. It says, make a difference in someone's day. That's on my to-do list. Now, people, again, you don't have to go that far. Like I do that because I know that in the pace of the day, I need that stop. I need that like, oh, right. This is important.
Totally.
And by putting it on there, I know I'll do it. Like I know it will get the attention it deserves. I can't tell you how many times people said, well, why would you shouldn't you just do that naturally? I'm like, probably,
you can't rely on your mind to do that. No, and that's not a knock against you. Can I give an example that just happened? So
absolutely.
This last Friday, I did a 12-hour walk challenge. I had interviewed a guy by the name of Colin O'Brady. He's like a 10-time world record explorer adventurer crossing Antarctica and so forth. And he just realized in all these expeditions that it's that time in silence by yourself that a lot of stuff, is cleared out, then reflections and insights come up. So he's like, how can I make this more accessible to everyone? So he came up with the idea, 12-hour walk, no music, no podcasts, no connection, just walk for 12 hours. and which was quite you think just walking, and I consider myself a fairly fit individual, but let me tell you, halfway through, I was like, this is going to be interesting, to make my way home. But what I noticed right away, I started at 6 in the morning, was ending at 6 p.m. This wasn't a race. There was no tracking on time, pace, any of it. It's just here's tracking your distance essentially and time. That's it. But I wasn't being compared to anyone. Naturally, without even thinking about it, my mind was going to, I need to get downtown by this time. And all of a sudden my legs start to speed up and so forth. And I remember thinking, why? Like there is no reason for me to get anywhere at any time. I could just walk in a circle for 12 hours and I would have accomplished the objective. But then I thought, well, of course, because the standard day, I'm always running from one meeting to the next or conversation. And when those days are a little lighter on the meetings, then I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I finish my work in between those meetings? And it's always a rush. Finish the day. Next thing you know, I'm rushing to make sure that I'm done. So we have dinner on time with the kids, clean the kitchen, rush to the baths, just so we can have a couple hours just to relax before going to sleep. And, I have the practices, to be self-aware, but it took some sort of break like that, to your point on just putting something on the to-do to just cut the cycle. And, now I've got some data, again, some clarity. Well, how can I make some changes so that that my life doesn't feel so rushed, even though I didn't even realize it, but it took that walk to do that, right? So we have to, if we don't give ourselves those opportunities to still the mind so that these things can come up, then we fall into autopilot. It just keeps going.
And the autopilot isn't just the autopilot of what's inside our mind, but the external demands, like the external.
Exactly.
It's us against, it's our mind against everything else. Now, I want to go, speaking of, going through things, like a 12-hour walk, some people be like, I can't do that. That doesn't mean you need to do something like that. It's not like you need to, there's other ways to do it, obviously. Reading the book, I'm taking it apart. If you're on the YouTube channel, if you're watching as a TimeCrafting Trust Premium member, you can see this book is beautifully crafted. I mean, I expect nothing less from Baron Fig as well. There's a nice little bookmark, which I put back in its little holder. Always nice to get a bookmark. And Personal Socrates, of course, the book itself is well put together. I've actually written some stuff inside because whenever I get a new book, I always like to kind of, there's a couple things I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
First off, the pages left in the bottom of
that's Joey.
Okay.
That's 100% Joey.
Do you know why? Why was that decision made? Why was that choice made? Because, I mean, again, this is emblematic of like a well-crafted, it's a joy to like go through the book, the paper, all that stuff. And we're not even just, I'm talking about like the build, but then also the actual content as well, which we'll get to just before we wrap up. But I mean, that little piece, I'm like, oh, and this directly correlates to I have to get downtown. I have to hurry to get that. Yeah. Like the pages left, it almost feels like, oh, well, I only have 2 more pages to read. There's almost that level there. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from my understanding, I'm pretty sure the concept just came up. He said, why can't we borrow, Kindle's strategy with pages left on any electronic devices and bring that to the analog paper world, which is, a great insight. But the thing that really kind of seals the deal for me was that for anyone that has the book, or if they're going to pick up the book, the whole intention was to write chapters that were short enough, 3 to 4 pages, that you can consume them as your mental fitness in the morning to start off your day if you're doing nothing. And if you have a system in place or practices, then you can layer this in. There's obviously the intention is to provide some good reflections and narratives to support them in a short amount of time, so that we don't fall into that I don't have time to do this, right? And the pages left, again, to your point, it's just another little subtle detail to show, okay, again, while your coffee is brewing, like I still read my own book. It sits right beside the coffee machine, right next to Robert Greene's Daily Laws. And those are the 2 books I pick up that are quick starter points for me in the morning, because then my mind starts fueled with healthy nutrition, good content, right? I'm not jumping into social media or news headlines. I'm starting the day with a prime mind, ready to go, and just doing that, you feel like you've already won the day. So that, that was a bit of the premise behind the pages left, and just again showing that you could really get a lot in 5 or 10 minutes in terms of consuming one of the chapters.
Got another question that's on the TimeCrafting Trust Premium YouTube link right now, which is, and this may be forecasting, what is the title of your next book? And why is it that next title? Have you gotten that far yet? Or are you still are you in the process?
I am in the process. The process has taken a couple twists and turns, like as it should, and I value and appreciate that. What is I don't have a title, but what's consistent is the theme around who are you? And I started working on the next book concept and thinking of who are the people that have a lot of influence and have the chance to create a lot of impact just based on what they do as a career and so forth. And I started to think about the musicians that inspire us through their art, and because we all have a song that moves us, right? Like can shift our mental state. But then I started to think there's also a whole other story that's not being told when you look at performers like Shawn Mendes or Justin Bieber, who both just recently canceled their tours because of their mental health. I want to know, what are you doing now? Like what questions did you ask to build the courage to cancel that tour? And most importantly, what are the things you're doing to train your mind to come back stronger? What does that look like? Who are you and who are you striving to become? That's the through line. So I started working on a book concept, and I'm being pointed in the direction of more of a limited film series. So if there are any producers out there listening, I am looking for a producing partner, but that's the next big project is around, again, the mental fitness, the questions that are fueling the minds of people doing a really great work that are all very relatable to any of us, because the questions make all of this stuff relatable, right? Like Picasso is one of the profiles in the book, but his questions are very relatable to any of us.
Yeah, there's Tolkien in there. There's Kobe Bryant. I mean, and you alluded to how to read the book. Like, I mean, it's not much like the 12-hour walk. Like, you could walk for 1 hour a day, 12 days in a row, and just have the same. You could get the same impact. Same thing with the book. If you read the book all in one go, I don't think it would have. I think it defeats the purpose, right?
Totally.
I think
Yeah.
I think you have to kind of bit by bit, kind of, and that way you can dwell on it and ruminate, right?
Well, and with any book, I mean, the way to get the most out of books is to really pick a book, or in this case, a chapter or set of questions that links to something that you're thinking about right now, or that you're trying to solve, because then all of a sudden the knowledge that you're picking up, you can flip it into action.
Yeah.
So that's why for the book, I suggest to just skim the table of contents and see where your finger naturally stops. It might be the person profile, or it might be the prompt, but there's a reason your finger stopped there. And because there is a reason behind that intuitive hunch, you'll probably get the most out of it. And the reason I said that I often turn to my own book is depending on what's going on. If there's something in my mind that is bothering me, or flip side, I'm trying to ideate at another level and trying to come up with really unique ideas. I know there are profiles in here that'll ask me questions, and also the narratives to support them that will inspire me to think differently.
All right, one last question before we wrap up, and that actually was a beautiful way to kind of segue into it, because this was not something I thought about, but I'm looking inside the table of contents.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what question is the one that is probably the one I would look at first and probably revisit more regularly right now than anything else, which will probably, my goal is anyone who's listening to this now will go, I wonder why, because the question that, because actually by the time this is released, you may have a sense, but those that are watching the video live, the TimeCrafting Trust Premium members, this is the question that I'm kind of pondering, and it's in part one, which is get clear. It's Robin Williams' question. What does it mean to be unapologetically me? That's a big one. So that's mine. What's yours?
Mine right now is, how can I meet the world as it is? And that's in Jerry Colonna's chapter and profile. Is I always find when the world feels heavy, it's helpful to jump into a question like that because it usually, well, in the chapter, it leads to the notion that everything is impermanent. And that the good, the bad, everything's in cycles. A storm may come through, but it'll pass and so forth. So for me, I turn to that one just whenever whenever my mind feels heavy, and it just immediately resets it that this is just a moment in time. It literally can be just a paragraph in my chapter of like book of life type thing, right? So, which links to the other profiles that I usually, revisit the most is just what story am I creating for myself? What chapter am I, what's the next chapter looking like? And that's a fun journaling process, right? It doesn't always have to be about releasing tension or anxiety or depressive thoughts. It can be very, uplifting on the other side of just designing the life of your dreams and just letting your mind go there. Right? Like go to let your imagination run wild.
Mark, this has been a great conversation. The book is called Personal Socrates, Questions That Will Upgrade Your Life from Legends and World-Class Performers. It is well written. It is well crafted. It is a phenomenal piece of art that I'm holding on to right here. So, all around. Where can people pick up the book and keep up with the work that you're doing?
Oh, thanks, Mike. I mean, obviously I'm going to plug Baron Fig. You can get the book directly from Baron Fig's website. But if you go to my website, behindthehuman.com, I have links in terms of where you can get it, whether you want an Audible version or the hard copy. I do suggest the hard copy for all the reasons that you mentioned, Mike, and even I'm encouraging people to slow down and write in the book. And, there are small things like the book stays open when you write in it. It has Baron Fig's, lay flat notebook technology, which is nothing more annoying than when you're writing a book and the thing just flips around and you lose your page. So, I do encourage the hard copy, but it's available in e-format and Audible as well.
Mark, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you. I had a blast.
All right, we're going to end the stream, everybody. That was the end of the episode. Thanks to everybody that was watching live or watched the recording. I'm going to end the stream now. End stream.